Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the elections in Iran that are slated for March 1st. Candidates will vie for 285 of the 290 seats that comprise the Iranian Consultative Assembly. The other 5 seats, by the way, are reserved. They're reserved for Zoroastrians, Jews, Assyrians, Chaldean Christians, and Armenians. They are reserved for minority groups within Iran. 5 seats. The Assembly of Experts will be holding their elections also. The Assembly of Experts is the 88-member august body that chooses Iran's supreme leader, which is really the leader of Iran. The results of this election will be like the results of all other elections held in Iran. A new regime, not even a democratically elected liberal regime, will turn Iran into a different country, a liberal country. It will not turn Iran into a Western-style democracy. It will not transform the Iran of today into a country that embraces the great culture of ancient Persia. Iran after March 1st will instead look a lot like Iran before March 1st. In Iran, there is a very strict set of requirements for candidates intending to stand for election. Anyone who does not fit the mold is simply not permitted to run. Hassan Rouhani, let's say for instance, who was president of Iran for 9 years between 2013 and 2021, for example, has been disqualified from running for office this time. Rouhani is not permitted to run, not because of term limits, but because his supporters and he himself are seen as too liberal. While he is appealing the decision, there is no chance that Rouhani will actually win the appeal. He knows it, we know it. This is, after all, Iran. When he ran first and successfully ran, Rouhani was a reform candidate. He was touted by Western world as the reformer who was going to change Iran. But that never happened, of course. We know why. This time around, even if a reform candidate were to win the election, we will all be more modest in our aspirations about reform in Iran. History has shown that the newly elected president will have no strength to implement either pro-Western or Western-friendly policies. This time around, we will have learned our lesson from Rouhani. When Hassan Rouhani last ran for election as president of Iran, Westerners were duped into believing that this new liberal Iranian leader would bring Iran into a new era. We believed, or wanted to believe, that he would lead Iran towards more Western-leaning mindset. Western analysts and Western leaders fell in love with Rouhani. They loved his ideas and were swayed by his rhetoric. And Rouhani had all good intentions. He too believed his rhetoric. But that type of reform cannot happen in Iran. It's as simple as that. President of Iran is neither the supreme lawmaker nor the senior decision maker in Iran, and certainly not the assembly. Iran is entrenched in their long-held Ayatollah dictated policies. Their foreign policy approach, which is anti-Western, anti-United States, anti-Israel, will continue, unchanged, immutable. This time, please do not be swayed by the ridiculous sophistry woven together by amateur Western analysts, some even in Washington, who may continue to hold on to a dream of a reformed and liberal Iran in these elections. Iran will not change, not here. More importantly for us, Iran's foreign policy does not change. A significant slice of Iran's raison d'etre is to attack and destroy Israel in the West. Regardless of the upcoming elections, Iran will continue to attack Israel and the West. They will continue to use their proxies, like the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas, to do their work for them. Iran will take great pride in making the Middle East more volatile, more dangerous, and more combustible. That's what they do well. They will continue in their efforts, however, unsuccessful, to unite Muslim worlds against Israel and against the West. Iran yearns to be a central leader in the Muslim world, and Iran is convinced that Israel is a vehicle, a tool, a symbol of hate that will unite the Muslim masses. Iran is at a significant disadvantage in this task. While Iranians are Muslims, they are Persians. They are not Arabs. And as such, they would never naturally become an overall leader of the Muslim and Arab world. So they are hoping to unite and galvanize Muslims in their hatred of Jews in Israel. The other element working against Iran in their hope to become leader of the Muslim world is that they are Shiites in a sea of Sunni Muslims. Yet, they refuse to give up their dream of Arab and Muslim world leadership. The links that Iran has fostered with Russia and China will continue unchanged under a new presidency or a new leadership. This alliance is significant not because it empowers Iran to continue to bust U.S. sanctions, but because together they create a nexus that holds the belief that the United States should not dictate or direct world affairs. So yes, there are elections coming up in Iran for the assemblies, but it matters not who sits in the political seats of power in Iran. Iran is not about to change at this stage. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column from Ynet. It was published on February 23rd, 2024, and is authored by Matan Gutman. The column is called, "How Will Israel Probe the Worst Catastrophe in Its History?" Subtitled opinion, "The state has several options to investigate the events of October 7th, but public pressure and past precedents are likely to pressure decision makers to launch a public inquiry." In his column, Gutman dissects the burning question that everyone in Israel is asking. How did October 7th happen? This is how Gutman begins. Israel is currently facing one of the greatest disasters in its history. The Israeli public is rightfully seeking answers. How did the state of Israel, having the world's top military intelligence capabilities, get surprised in such a manner as happened on October 7th? How did the Hamas terror organization develop such significant military capabilities? Where were the military forces on the morning of October 7th? How did defenses built around the Gaza Strip, costing billions of shekels, collapse? And above all, who's responsible for these severe failures? And will the responsibility also be placed on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition ministers? Israeli law recognizes several possible mechanisms for probing serious events and disasters. At one end, there is a public inquiry. This is a special committee chaired by a judge, with its members chosen by the President of the Supreme Court, not the government. This committee has special and broad powers regarding the calling of witnesses, collection of evidence, issuing of search warrants, gathering of investigation materials, issuing of warnings to those who may be affected by the investigation or its results, and providing both systemic and personal recommendations. At the other end, there is a government inquiry committee appointed by a minister or the prime minister to examine matters within its jurisdiction. Such a committee doesn't have any legal authority to collect investigation materials or summon witnesses. In between these two options, there is a governmental examination committee with the powers under Section 8A of the Basic Law, the government. If a retired judge is appointed as a committee chair with the approval of the government, the Justice Minister may grant limited powers to the committee, such as the power to summon witnesses. Additionally, there is the state controller, who has already announced that he is conducting an audit of the events leading up to October 7th. However, the state controller, Netanyahu Engelman, clarified that the state controller's audit won't affect the actions of any inquiry committee that will be established in the future. I can vouch for Netanyahu Engelman. He is our first cousin. He is above all a straight shooter and above reproach. He is very good with a very keen mind. There are also historical precedents that can help Israel sort through this. Gutman illuminates a few and ends with a discussion of the year 2006 and the Second Lebanon War. He writes, "After the Second Lebanon War in 2006, Then Prime Minister Ehud Olmert attempted to avoid establishing a public inquiry and tried to set up a governmental investigative committee instead. This move sparked public criticism, and eventually the Olmert government appointed an inquiry commission led by Justice Eliyahu Winograd. The commission determined that Olmert, then Defense Minister Amir Peretz, and the IDF Chief of Staff Dan Chalutz failed in their roles. The committee determined Olmert, quote, was responsible for the lack of clear and cautious war objectives. He was ministerially and personally responsible for the lapses in decisions made and for the process of taking them, unquote. Gutman concludes his column advising that whatever type of inquiry is chosen, it must be complete and total. Otherwise, the people will not accept it. In his words, he writes, the state comptroller, as mentioned, has already begun to audit the process. But it seems that public pressure will require decision makers to establish a public inquiry commission with extensive investigative authority following the war. Any attempt by the government to establish a limited inquiry committee and appoint its members won't be accepted by the public, and such a decision is likely to be rejected by the Supreme Court as well. This was a more technical column than those we usually cover, but it is important for us to get the lay of the land in anticipation of what is yet to come inside of Israel regarding the investigation of what happened on October 7th. Next up is a column by Moshe Phillips. The column is from the JNS. It's entitled Serial Killer, Who Might Be the First President of Palestine? There's no subtitle. The column actually begins this way. A Greek Orthodox priest named Georgios Tepetsakis was murdered for the crime of driving while mistakenly being perceived as Jewish. And now his killer is being widely touted as the likely first president of Palestine. In recent weeks, pundits in the New York Times, The Guardian, and other news outlets have promoted Marwan Barghouti as the best candidate to replace Mahmoud Abbas as the head of the Palestinian Authority and then become the first president of the Palestine that they had hoped to establish. Incredibly, many of these Barghouti enthusiasts make no mention at all of the innocent people he was convicted of murdering. On that evening, the priest was driving back from Jerusalem to St. George's. A Palestinian Arab terrorist with a sniper rifle was hiding above the highway near the exit for the Jewish community of Ma'ale Adumim. As Father Germanos' car came into view, the terrorist saw his yellow license plates. So he opened fire, because if you have yellow Israeli license plates, you're probably Jewish. And if you're Jewish, you deserve to be murdered. Thus, the clergyman's life was taken at the age of 34. Barghouti was arrested and indicted as the mastermind of the murder of Father Germanos, as well as a string of other murders. Barghouti had the opportunity to contest the charges and prove his innocence, but refused to deny culpability and declared that the Zionist court had no right to prosecute him. On May 20th, 2004, Barghouti was convicted of the murders of Father Germanos and 4 other innocent people. He is serving 5 consecutive life sentences of life imprisonment. Phillips concludes his column, writing that people analyzing Barghouti don't know him. He writes, the various news columnists and others who have been building up Barghouti in recent weeks say that he is the only figure in the Palestinian Arab world who is popular enough to serve as head of the PA and then as the president of Palestine. That's what it concludes. I personally know Marwan Barghouti. I've met with him. I've sat face to face with him. Once I was even blindfolded and taken to meet him in an unknown location. Marwan Barghouti is a mastermind of galvanizing support. He is smart. He is dangerous. He is an anti-intellectual masquerading as a man of the people. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 5 cartoons and memes. Sorry, once more, no headlines today. First up is a billboard hanging in Manhattan, New York City. This billboard is sponsored by Agudas Yisrael, and it's called knowus.org. The segment of Agudas Yisrael that created this response was a response to the terrible media coverage of Orthodox Jewry, especially the world of the yeshiva day schools, which has been covered terribly. The first group targeted by it was the New York Times. They rented a billboard across the street from the New York Times to say and deliver their message. The billboard reads, "Our boys will not be educated to hate America." Next up are 4 anti-Israel cartoons. The first cartoon is about the World Court. Here we see an Israeli tank shooting holes in the World Court's report on Israeli genocide. The caption reads, "Look, holes in your evidence." Next up is a pencil sharpener with a pencil that has been whittled down almost to nothing sitting alongside. Only the eraser remains. Just the eraser. This is an extremely ugly depiction of Israel. In this next anti-Israel cartoon, we see a slow down for children school crossing sign in the midst of destruction in Gaza. Obviously, there's no school and no children. Just a terrible depiction again. This last cartoon is of a father and a son. The son is reading the newspaper report of the Mona Lisa, which was splashed with soup. The son says, "I wish I was a famous painting so people would throw soup at me," obviously saying that there's no food in Gaza. An awful depiction of Israel yet again that's being circulated by haters of Israel, even in the general press. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant vowed to intensify attacks on Hezbollah as Lebanese terrorist groups struggle to replace commanders eliminated in Israeli strikes. According to Gallant, who offered a situation assessment in the northern command base, Israel is targeting Hezbollah commanders. They're looking for replacements, and I can tell you, I don't see any volunteers. Everyone's too afraid. We will continue to strike them. If anyone believes that a hostage release deal in the south and a temporary ceasefire will ease the situation, they are mistaken. We will continue and intensify our efforts in the south until our objectives are met. Our goal is clear, to push Hezbollah back through either an agreement or force. King Abdullah of Jordan met with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. This is what Abdullah had to say. The continuation of the war in the Gaza Strip during Ramadan could lead to an expansion of conflict. The Jordanian news agency Petra, which covered the visit, added that King Abdullah emphasized the need for, and I'm quoting the news service here, a ceasefire in Gaza and the protection of innocent citizens. A statement from Abbas's office said that during the meeting, Abbas, and I'm quoting here again, warning of Israel's intention to impose restrictions on the entry of worshippers to the Al-Aqsa Mosque during the month of Ramadan, and emphasized the need to commit to preserving the historical and legal status of holy places, unquote. A senior Ukrainian official announced that Ukraine and its foreign partners could invite Russia to a future peace summit to discuss an end to Moscow's 2-year-old invasion on Kiev's terms. Andriy Yermak, Zelensky's chief of staff, has indicated that Switzerland will host a summit to discuss a vision for peace by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, which could be handed to Russia during the second meeting at a later date. He said, there can be a situation in which we together invite representatives of the Russian Federation where they will be presented with a plan in case whoever is representing the aggressor country at that time will want to genuinely end this war and return to a just peace. Yermak shared these comments during a televised conference in Kyiv. Zelensky's first announced his peace formula in November 2022 summit of the group of 20 major economies. His formula called for restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity and total withdrawal of Russian forces. Kyiv has maintained that it would not speak to Moscow until all Russian troops have left Ukrainian territory. In response, the Kremlin has said there is no current basis for peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, and that Kyiv's peace plan was absurd because it excluded Russia. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that a decision by the House of Commons Speaker to break with procedure due to threats facing some lawmakers over their views on Gaza conflict sent a dangerous signal that intimidation works. The British Parliament descended into chaos as tensions flared over a vote on whether to call for a ceasefire in Gaza and the exact language to use. The Speaker of the lower house, Lindsay Hoyle, said he broke with usual parliamentary procedure for the vote because of what he described as absolutely frightening threats against lawmakers. Posting on X, Sunak, the Prime Minister of Britain, said, "In Parliament this week, a dangerous signal was sent that intimidation works. It is toxic for our society and our politics, and it is an affront to the liberties and values we hold dear here in Britain. Our democracy cannot and must not bend to the threat of violence and intimidation or fall into polarized camps who hate each other." As if it wasn't enough, Sunak's Conservatives suspended Lee Anderson, one of their lawmakers, and the former party vice chairman for refusing to apologize for saying that the mayor of London was under the control of Islamists. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters gathered outside the parliament with messages beamed on the building's Elizabeth Tower. One of the messages read the often repeated comment, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," a call for the elimination of Israel. Both the Sunday Times and the Sunday Telegraph newspapers reported several members of parliament have been given taxpayer-funded bodyguards after being assessed to be at risk. Israel's Education Ministry issued a directive to schools in preparation for Purim. The directive states that students should not be allowed to arrive in costumes that may cause panic. According to the ministry, the instruction comes in the shadow of the war in accordance with the security reality. According to the announcement, the ministry recommends that administrators and teachers hold a dialogue with the community of students and parents on how to properly celebrate the holiday and encourage the students and families to take part in the joy of the holiday out of respect and recognition of the worry or sadness they experience. Also, within the guidelines, care must be taken to avoid arriving in costumes that may arouse fear, panic, or injury to another. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with two piquante pieces of information. I want to show you two video clips. The first is intended to be humorous. It comes from the Israeli comedy Eretz Nehederet, which means a wonderful land. They are the Israeli version of Saturday Night Live. This skit is made up of an interviewer interviewing Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas. While the skit is taped in November, it is still relevant and watched and rewatched today.
Good evening from London. 39 days after Hamas freedom fighters peacefully attacked Israel, we have now an exclusive interview with its leader, Yahya Sinwar.
Yes, good evening, Rachel. Let me just correct you.
Oh.
There were also freedom rapists and freedom butchers.
Of course, I apologize. Mr. Sinwar, I understand that you are now working towards a ceasefire.
Yes, Rachel, you know me. Wherever there is fire, I say, let's seize it. All we are saying is give ceasefire a chance.
The fire must be seized.
Yeah, the situation in Gaza is terrible, Rachel. All innocent civilians are running out of town, so we are left without protection.
with no human shield at all. So unfair.
So unfair. And our hospitals, Rachel, our schools all run out of rockets. How are we supposed to kill Jews like this? I mean, with lectures?
Actually, we've tried that one. Didn't work.
I plead to the world. We need a ceasefire. We are tired. We need a break. Don't forget, we started a day earlier than the Israeli.
So
a day earlier.
Unfair, so unfair. But I understand the Zionists refuse to put down the weapons.
Yes. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? All we want is a little time to rearm before we continue to kill them, and they won't let us.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sinoir. I can't hear you. All this noise in the background.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Rachel. There is a baby here.
Could you please get him to be quiet?
Yeah, I wish I could. He's not mine, and his mother is in Israel. Never mind.
Okay, look, it's really hard to conduct an interview with this noisy kidnapped baby. Is he always like that?
At night, it's even worse, Rachel. Every time we fire a rocket, he wakes up.
Oh, no.
I didn't have one good night sleep in a month.
Wait, are you telling me that there is an Israeli baby that's torturing you by sleep deprivation?
What? Yes!
Occupying your house?
Yes!
So unfair, so unfair. And the world does absolutely nothing about it. I really hope you'll get a ceasefire soon. Thank you so much, Mr. Sinoir.
No. Thank you, Rachel.
And now, please stay with us for a moment of history.
On this day in 1944, heartless Winston Churchill refused a ceasefire and continued the genocidal attack on Nazi Germany. As we well know now, far more German civilians have died in the war, which makes them the victims and Britain the war criminal.
I hope you enjoyed that skit. Changing gears, next up is a short Instagram post about standing up and fighting Jew hatred. It's filled with familiar faces and stars, and it is very powerful.
It's a new year with new voices.
It's a new year with new voices.
It's a new year with new voices joining us every day.
I am a proud Jewish woman. I hope you'll stand against anti-Semitism with me.
I just want to say that I am a Jew. I'm a proud Jew. 2024 is the year of new voices.
It's a new year with new voices.
We finally have new voices joining me in the fight against anti-Semitism.
It's those who speak up for others that actually make the biggest difference.
I want to make my position very clear.
I hope you will stand with me.
I hope that you will stand with me in the fight against anti-Semitism.
Of course, I stand against anti-Semitism.
I hope you'll stand with me against anti-Semitism.
I stand 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 against anti-Semitism.
We stand against anti-Semitism.
And it's time for you to stand up with me.
Let's hope it has its effect. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.